her voice suddenly died into an almost inaudible, breathless croaking. Her mouth fell open. She made a desperate effort to fill her lungs with air, but it was as though she had forgotten how to breathe. She tried to cry out, but no sound came. Only the terror of her staring eyes revealed what she was suffering. Her hands went to her throat, then clawed at the air she could no longer breathe, the air that for her had ceased to exist. The savage was on his feet, bent over her. "What is it, Linda? What is it?" His voice was imploring. It was as though he were begging to be reassured. The look she gave him was charged with an unspeakable terror, and, it seemed to him, reproach. She tried to raise herself in bed, but fell back on the pillows. Her face was horribly distorted, her lips blue. The savage turned and ran up the wall. "Quick! Quick!" he shouted. "Quick!" Standing in the center of a ring of zipper-hunting twins, the head nurse looked round. The first moment's astonishment gave place almost instantly to disapproval. "Don't shout! Think of the little ones," she said, frowning. "You might decondition. But what are you doing?" He had broken through the ring. "Be careful!" A child was yelling. "Quick! Quick!" He caught her by the sleeve, dragged her after him. "Quick! Something's happened! I've killed her!" By the time they were back at the end of the ward, Linda was dead. The savage stood for a moment in frozen silence, then fell on his knees beside the bed, and, covering his face with his hands, sobbed uncontrollably. The nurse stood irresolute, looking now at the kneeling figure by the bed, the scandalous exhibition, and now, poor children, at the twins who had stopped their hunting of the zipper and were staring from the other end of the ward, staring with all their eyes and nostrils at the shocking scene that was being enacted around bed 20. Should she speak to him? Try to bring him back to a sense of decency? Remind him of where he was? Of what fatal mischief he might do to these poor innocents? Undoing all their wholesome death conditioning with this disgusting outcry, as though death were something terrible, as though anyone mattered as much as all that. It might give them the most disastrous ideas about the subject, might upset them into reacting in the entirely wrong, the utterly antisocial way. She stepped forward. She touched him on the shoulder. "Can't you behave?" she said in a low, angry voice. But, looking round, she saw that half a dozen twins were already on their feet and advancing down the ward. The circle was disintegrating. In another moment— no, the risk was too great. The whole group might be put back 6 or 7 months in its conditioning. She hurried back towards her menaced charges. "Now, who wants a chocolate eclair?" she asked in a loud, cheerful tone. "Me!" yelled the entire Bokanovsky group in chorus. Bed 20 was completely forgotten. "Oh, God, God, God!" the savage kept repeating to himself. In the chaos of grief and remorse that filled his mind, it was the one articulate word. "God!" he whispered it aloud. "God!" "Whatever is he saying?" said a voice, very near, distinct, and shrill through the warblings of the Super Wurlitzer. The savage violently started, and, uncovering his face, looked round. 5 khaki twins, each with the stump of a long eclair in his right hand, and their identical faces variously smeared with liquid chocolate, were standing in a row, puggily goggling at him. They met his eyes and simultaneously grinned. One of them pointed with his eclair butt. "Is she dead?" he asked. The savage stared at them for a moment in silence. Then, in silence, he rose to his feet. In silence, slowly walked towards the door. "Is she dead?" repeated the inquisitive twin, trotting at his side. The savage looked down at him, and, still without speaking, pushed him away. The twin fell on the floor and at once began to howl. The savage did not even look round.
Oh, brave new world. Hello, everybody. Venominous is back. Did you enjoy that little bit of death conditioning for the children in the Brave New World? We are now at that point here in our world, the real world. Something I've been meaning to cover for a while. Article on BioEdge. Medical Assistance in Dying MAID Activity Book. Yes, normalizing MAID with coloring books for Canadian children. We're gonna head over to the book right now. So, here we go. The cartoons kind of remind me a little bit of Dr. Seuss in the way that they are shaped. Not so much the caricatures, but just the way things are drawn. What is MAID? Who can have MAID? How does MAID work? Why would children want MAID? Or why would someone want MAID? Making plans for MAID. Exploring your feelings, step by step. A note for adults. I'm not going to waste much time here on this actual thing. It's not much of an activity book, more just explaining a bunch of stuff in a simplistic way for children to help normalize it. Because we need a world of mature minors, right? That understand what MAID is and can make their informed decision. As Dying with Dignity Canada would have it their way. The DWDC acknowledges that Canadian society will likely expect a minimum age for mature minors in the legislation, even though the emphasis at common law is on capacity and maturity and non-chronological age. For this reason, DWDC asks that Parliament amend the existing age requirement of 18 years of age to extend it to persons, quote, at least 12 years of age and capable of making decisions with respect to their health. As with adults, there should be a presumption of capacity for these minors. Scroll down. What medical decisions can mature minors make today? It is important to note that mature minor is a spectrum rather than a binary. Yes, everything is on a spectrum, folks. Because we wouldn't want any clear, defining definitions of what groups people fall into. We want to keep it all very spectrum-y. This means that while some mature minors are legally capable of making decisions about end-of-life care, others are only able to make decisions about when to take a medication or whether to receive a vaccine. Well, I really don't see the difference in those things, if you catch my drift. Of getting a jab and making an end-of-life choice. But I digress. Let's move on. Here's Bill of Health from February 17th, or 7th. I got 17th on the brain apparently. February 7th, 2018. Extending the right to die to mature minors in Canada. Until February 2016, medical assistance in dying MAID in Canada, which encompasses both euthanasia and physician-assisted suicide, was prohibited under the criminal code as a form of homicide. Well, truer words have never been spoken, because that's exactly what it is. But anyways, this ruling was challenged in Carter versus Canada in the Supreme Court and overturned on the grounds that the ruling opposed the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. In June 2016, MAID became legal in Canada under Bill C-14. The decision to omit minors from legislation on MAID was influenced by the Canadian Pediatric Society CPS report, which cited the lack of available data for unmet need, as well as the lack of information on Canadian population's consensus of this issue. Since then, more information about the need for MAID for minors has emerged. The CPS surveyed 1,050 pediatricians, finding that 35 physicians had conversations with 60 minor patients about MAID and received 17 explicit requests for MAID. Moreover, data from Belgium and the Netherlands suggests that some minors already use medical aid in dying in Belgium. There has been one reported case of a 17-year-old receiving euthanasia since the 2014 legislation extending to minors, and in the Netherlands, there have been 5 reported cases between 2002 and 2012, including one 12-year-old and 4 individuals aged 16 to 17. While more information about Canadian societal attitudes towards MAID with respect to minors is still necessary, it is clear that minors do suffer to the extent that they consider assisted death a serious option. Anyways, moving on. So, Canada has updated its MAID back in 2021 on March 17th. That would include people that weren't terminally dying. They weren't going to die necessarily. So this extended the people that would just be suffering. Persons who wish to receive MAID must satisfy the following eligibility criteria: be 18 years of age or older and have a decision-making capacity, be eligible for publicly funded healthcare services, make a voluntary request that is not the result of external pressure, give informed consent to receive MAID, meaning that the person has consented to receiving MAID after they have received all the information needed to make the decision, have a serious and incurable illness, disease, or disability, excluding a mental illness until March 17th, 2023. There's your 17 again. This year of 2023, in March. That will no longer be disqualifying criteria. Be in an advanced state of irreversible declining incapability, have an enduring and intolerable physical or psychological suffering that cannot be alleviated under conditions the person considers acceptable. So, eligibility for persons suffering from mental illness. Canadians whose only medical condition is a mental illness and who otherwise meet all eligibility criteria will not be eligible for MAID until March 17, 2023. This includes conditions that are primarily within the domain of psychiatry, such as depression and personality disorders. It does not include neurocognitive and neurodevelopmental disorders, or other conditions that may affect cognitive abilities. So, mental illness is all that you need to go kill yourself legally in Canada. But not really killing yourself, you have someone murder you, basically. Now, why are they trying to normalize this with children? Well, there's a thing called suicide contagion. It's a very real thing. Contagion of suicidal behavior. Evidence has accumulated to support the idea that suicidal behaviors is contagious, in that it can be transmitted directly or indirectly from one person to another. This evidence is derived from 3 bodies of research: studies of the impact of media reporting on suicide, studies of suicide clusters, and studies of the impact on adolescents of exposure to a suicidal peer. In each case, suicide contagion can be viewed within the larger context of behavioral contagion or social learning theory. While research has also addressed the distinct but related topic of the contagion of non-suicidal self-injurious behavior, Jacobson and Gold, 2009, blah blah blah, the current review focuses specifically on attempted and completed suicide. So, the more that this is normalized, the more it will be talked about, the more children access the service, the more children will access the service. Just like all the behaviors we've seen become contagious, certain alphabet group that I will not mention, I will not say outright, there's been a great bit of contagion there in the school system. Just imagine what we will see in the future when euthanasia or kids accessing MAID becomes a thing in the school discussion. Now, I've been covering the the whole topic of euthanasia for many years. This was a 4 years ago article, one of the blogs I wrote. One of the last ones I wrote was that my prediction came true, that teen was euthanized for depression. This was, where was it? In the Netherlands, the 17-year-old, Noah Pothoven. Very suspicious story. A lot of contradictory things in it. But nonetheless, this child was murdered, legally murdered, and had no other symptoms, nothing other than depression, basically, was the only reason. Now, that's not to say that there wasn't younger suicide victims. Previously, there was 3 kids who were euthanized, a 9-year-old, 11-year-old, and another 17-year-old. And that would be in this article here, about. So back in 2018, I quoted myself here. That's the trigger word. That's the word that my eyes zoomed in on when I read the article. This was talking about my previous blog and the article I read there. Mental. That's important to note, because I believe that eventually that's all that will be required in the future. The normalization of mental illness is a subject I write about a while back. And this is the article where I had made that quote: euthanasia, the normalization of suicide, just took an emotional turn. And we scroll down, and the quote is here. Anyways, the next. This is another article I wrote. And this is where I talked about suicide contagion, or quote, yeah. Eventually, as the epidemic of suicide contagion continues among minors, we will see more reforms, more qualifications for euthanasia will be added. It's a process of baby steps to where suicide is so normal that we have public suicide booths on the street corner. Now, will we actually have public suicide booths? Perhaps. Or, we'll get into it a bit later, perhaps it will just be a pill. Here is a suicide pod, though, that is one that's made the rounds for several years, the suicide pod. This one, in particular that I talk about, would have the possibility of being eyelid activated for those who, don't have the power to press a button or pull a switch, pull the lever, or whatever the suicide pod would require. Now, these suicide pods discussed are actually 3D printable, so you could download and print your own suicide pod at home, and off yourself if you so wish to. Anyways, I don't think I had anything else in this. Oh, yes, I did. There was a article that I had talking about this man who invented the pod, just looking into him and stuff. And we scroll down to individual rights argument. Nitsky, or Nits, yeah, I don't know how to pronounce it, argues that an individual person has a fundamental right to control their own death, just as they have a right to control their own life. He believes in having a peaceful pill available for every adult of sound mind. Now, I made the connection with this to the Demise Pill that was discussed about in the New Order of Barbarians. Euthanasia and the Demise Pill. Everybody has a right to live only so long. The old are no longer useful. They become a burden. You should be ready to accept death. Most people are. An arbitrary age limit could be established. After all, you have a right to only so many steak dinners, so many orgasms, and so many good pleasures in life. And after you have had enough of them, and you're no longer productive, working, and contributing, then you should be ready to step aside for the next generation. Some things that would help people realize that they had lived long enough. He mentioned several of these. I don't remember them all. Here are a few. Use only very pale printing ink on forms that people are necessary to fill out, so that older people wouldn't be able to read the pale ink as easily and would need to go to younger people for help. Automobile traffic patterns. There would be more high-speed traffic lanes, traffic patterns that other older people with their slower reflexes would have trouble dealing with, and thus lose some of their independence. Limiting access to affordable medical care makes eliminating elderly easier. A big item was elaborated at some length, was the cost of medical care would be made burdensomely high. Medical care would be connected very closely with one's work, but also would be made very, very high in cost, so that it would simply be unavailable to people beyond a certain time. And unless they had a remarkably rich, supporting family, they would just have to do without care. And the idea was that if everybody says enough, what a burden it is on the young to try to maintain the old people, then the young would become agreeable to helping mom and dad along the way, provided this was done humanely and with dignity. And then the example was there could be like a nice farewell party, a real celebration. Mom and dad had done a good job, and then after the party's over, they take the Demise Pill. That was those tapes were recorded in 1969. Excuse me. They recorded it in the 80s or whatever. But the man who records them is giving you his recollection of a conference he attended in 1969, where the director, Richard Day, told a group of pediatricians and stuff what the plan was going down for the next foreseeable future. And it's very accurate. I recommend you watch these tapes. You will find so many things that have come to pass and things that are coming to pass now. It's one of my go-to resources because it is so on point. But I digress. Let's move on. So, everybody has a right to so many steak dinners and orgasms and pleasures and the good things in life, right? Arbitrary age will be needed, or could be set for people to go. And they will take the peaceful pill, the Demise Pill. Now, let's touch on Children of Men. This movie was set in 2027. It fairly accurately predicted the 2008 flu pandemic. Well, they say 2008, but it was a year after. 2009 swine flu pandemic happened. Now we all know how that turned out. That was more of a practice run for what we're seeing now. But again, we will move on. I just wanted to show how that movie accurately predicts a thing that has happened. And here's another thing that is coming down the pike. Here is a commercial in the movie for the Quietus pill.
The time is 7:59 a.m.
What is the Quietus pill? Well, it's a suicide pill, and it's heavily promoted in the Children of Men to the public, who can no longer have babies because they have all gone infertile. So you think with a shrinking population, because you don't have anyone new coming in, that you would maybe hold on to the population, but no. In this future of Children of Men, there is chaos, there is war. Funny enough, there's a nuclear attack by the Russians. No, it doesn't show it in the show because it happened past tense. But there's articles that show that nuclear attacks had occurred from Russia. Something I pointed out in my recent video. That was the Children of Men, the Year of the Rabbit. Now, interesting enough, we're getting lovely commercials from Canadian retail stores. Canadian retailers' commercial celebrates the hard beauty of assisted suicide. Ah, it's beautiful. The most beautiful exit. Let's watch that video, shall we? First, I have to tell them it's okay to show me suicidal content.
Dying in a hospital is not what's natural. That's not what's soft. And in these kinds of moments, you need softness. Last breaths are sacred. When I imagine my final days, I see bubbles. I see the ocean. I see music. I see cheesecake.
You see how she's celebrating, just like they say. Mom and Dad did a good job. They celebrate before they die. Yeah, same thing.
Even now, as I seek help to end my life, there is still so much beauty. You just have to be brave enough to see it.
Oh, isn't it beautiful? She took her life in 2022. She was murdered. And this is a retail company. Who was it again? It was... Simon's. A retail store in Quebec is promoting assisted suicide in their commercials. Like, hello? A little bit of agenda much? Which, another classic film where they promote the time to wrap it up and kill yourself is Soylent Green. We have to watch that one too. Horrible. That reminds me of a story that I saw a while back. Inside the Swiss assisted suicide clinic, where U.S. sisters paid $11,000 each to die. The facility has cool white walls, designer furniture, and a death room where you're hooked up to a drip or given drink that will kill you. Is that not straight up Soylent Green? Like, that is a script for script similarity there. It's ridiculous. The Swiss assisted suicide clinic. Say that fast 5 times. Swiss assisted suicide clinic. Swiss assisted suicide clinic, where 2 U.S. sisters believed to have paid $11,000 each to die at school. White, blah blah blah. I already read that part. Leila Mori, a 54-year-old palliative care doctor, and Susan Fraser, a 49-year-old nurse, traveled from Phoenix to Basel, Switzerland on February 3rd and died on February 11th. Again, 11. 2 11s there. Your 11,000 and your February 11th, the magic number. Basel is home to the Pegasus Swiss Association, which, unlike Dignatus and Exit International, the 2 largest assisted suicide organizations in the country, accepts applications for voluntary assisted dying, or VAD, from people who are not terminally ill The clinic, which was established in August 2019, has a neat and unassuming white exterior with wooden shutters. It is 3 stories high, with the hairdresser also occupying its first floor. Well, you can get your hair done and get done. There is no obvious indication outside it. The building is also home to an assisted suicide facility. Pagos's waiting room is equally low-key and resembles the lobby of doctor's surgery or hairdressers. It has soothing white walls, mid-century designer furniture, and plants, as well as lights to further enhance its calming vibe. How nice. Oh, it's so calming. About to die. Wow. One of Pegasus... Is it Pegasus? I was saying Pegasus. Pegasus Death Rooms is pictured in a 2020 documentary about Laura Henkel, who chose to die there. She traveled to Switzerland from her home in Australia with the company. Was featured in a 2020 documentary on the death of Laura Henkel, with daughter and filmmaker Kathy and granddaughter. On the right, the intravenous drip that she chose as her method of death is pictured right to the right. Patients can also opt for a deadly drink. Pegasus death rooms are intimate, and at least one appears to be windowless or have its curtains drawn for privacy. Images of one of the rooms shown on Australia and American documentaries about patients who previously traveled there to die show cinder block walls painted white, as well as what appears to be a rug pinned to the walls. Laura Henkel, an Australian woman who allowed her filmmaker daughter to record her final moments at Pegasus, was seen laying in the laying on the death room's bed during her final moments in December of 2019. Anyway, you get the point. We also saw a similar thing in the movie Midsommar, movie in 2019, where, did I have it? Yes, I did. In their little society there, they decided at the age of 72 that you would jump off a cliff and die. And if you failed to actually die on the plunge, they would mercy kill you by bludgeoning your skull with a mallet. How nice. See, there's the repetitive theme here. You gotta wrap it up because you're a waste of space now. And we actually, it just came to my memory here of George Bernard Shaw.
I never know exactly how to make my opinion clear because I object to all punishment whatsoever. I don't want to punish anybody. But there are an extraordinary number of people whom I want to kill. Not in any unkind or personal spirit, but it must be evident to all of you. You must all know half a dozen people at least who are no use in this world, who are more trouble than they are worth. And I think it would be a good thing to make everybody come before a properly appointed board, just as he might come before the income tax commissioners, and say every 5 years or every 7 years, just put him there and say, sir or madam, now will you be kind enough to justify your existence? If you can't justify your existence, if you're not pulling your weight in the social boat, if you're not producing as much as you consume, or perhaps a little more, then clearly we cannot use the big organization of our society for the purpose of keeping you alive, because your life does not benefit us and it can't be of very much use to you.
Please justify your existence. Yes, this is an old socialist point of view, communist point of view, that you must all produce for the great machine, and we will provide everything for you, of course. You will be well fed, you'll be dressed, and if you don't pull your weight in the hive, you're out, basically. And that's the kind of conditioning that they're putting on us. I had a few more things, such as we are seeing examples of this now basically, here in Canada. MPs challenged minister over instances of maid offered to veterans. Yes. Veterans Affairs Minister Lawrence Macaulay was challenged by MPs on Monday after how the federal government is handling the growing number of veterans who reported being offered medical assistance and dying, while MPs are questioning whether the situation is more widespread than the department has acknowledged. Macaulay says officials are working with the facts they have. During a House of Commons Veteran Affairs Committee meeting on Monday, Conservative MP Blake Richards said that since Macaulay confirmed 2 weeks ago that Veterans Affairs Canada was aware of four instances of medical assistance and dying being offered to veterans by one employee, has become aware of additional alleged incidents. Think of that, people. They're offering maid to people who are veterans. We can't afford to give you any more money that you did your service for the country. You put your life on the line. And say what you want about wars and that. You know, that's not here or there. The point is, these people did commit to serving the country. Yeah. That's what it's all about, folks. It's about eliminating as many people as possible for climate. For the climate change agenda. But is it really about climate? I gotta get rid of that carbon. Here's another instance. We're just gonna play this video. Start it from the beginning.
He is not ready to die, and he doesn't want to. And yet, he has passed the first hurdle for medically assisted dying. Tonight, City News speaks with a man who feels he has no choice but to end his life because of a broken social safety net.
How would you describe the quality of your life?
Awful, non-existent, terrible. I do nothing other than sort of manage symptoms, manage pain. There we go.
Amir Farsood lives with never-ending agony from a back injury. How bad does it get?
At worst, it gets bad enough that I'm crying like a 5-year-old and not sleeping for 2 days in a row.
But that's not why he has applied for medically assisted dying, otherwise known as MAID, nor is it the depression he lives with. Farsood has applied because he is in danger of losing his housing. He lives in this St. Catharines rooming house, sharing this space with 2 other people, but it is up for sale. Farsood lives on social assistance and says he can't find anywhere else he can afford.
I don't want to die, but I don't want to be homeless more than I don't want to die.
Medically assisted dying in Canada was expanded this past March to include people with disabilities or those suffering in pain, even if they are not close to death. That means Farsood likely qualifies. This checkmark on his form signed by his doctor indicates where he meets the MAID criteria: physical suffering due to disability that is intolerable and cannot be relieved. He needs one more doctor to sign off. Farsood is not the first person with a disability to consider MAID.
They don't want to live this way anymore. You know, there's no safety net at all.
For the last 2 years, City News has documented how people with disabilities on Ontario Disability Support Payments, or ODSP, are struggling to survive and would consider MAID when it was expanded.
Sometimes it's a choice between burning to death and jumping out of a high-rise building.
Walmart, Costa.
Life on ODSP is a life well below the poverty line. Farsood makes a little over $1,200 a month on ODSP. Rent is $690 a month. After bills and expenses are paid, he has about $7 a day left for food.
What do you buy to survive?
A lot of beans.
That's why he can't pay more for rent. Farsood has been told the wait list for affordable housing is 7 years. MAID is his out.
That's definitely not what MAID was designed for, but cases like that are emerging with increasing frequency across the country.
Dr. Carrie Bowman is a bioethicist at U of T.
These are a minority of cases, but ethically it doesn't matter that they're a minority, they're there. We were unbelievably naive as a nation to think that vulnerability disability, poverty, that we could just somehow parcel that off and it wasn't going to be a problem. It's a huge problem.
There is a 90-day waiting period after applying for MAID. Farsood believes he could technically be eligible next month.
Are you afraid to die?
Who isn't? Yeah, I was going to be the tough guy and not do this, but yeah, at 3 in the morning I am. I wouldn't be.
Assisted dying is available in some 7 countries, including several states in the U.S. Now, it's difficult to compare because guidelines vary from country to country, but some argue Canada is the most lenient when it comes to the criteria. Tomorrow, I'll tell you how the number of MAID cases is rising and the federal government's response.
Well, there you have it. Don't want to be homeless? Well, get MAID. The MAID will come. MAID will clear you out. That's Canada for you. So yeah, this is a fine country we're in. But it's just all following the agenda. It's just the map, the world map. It's all gonna. Every country will be like that one day. If things continue to go as they go. Remember during the pandemic, one life was too many. Well, we know we're living in inverse world, right? So one is actually not enough for these elite psychopaths. But I digress. Just recently, on The Last of Us, a series that just started, and I'm going to spoil alert here, so if you don't want to hear this part, you should probably tune out. But anyways, in the 3rd episode, the character Bill, I've never played the game, so I didn't know these characters, but this character Bill shows up in the 3rd one, and apparently they've completely rewritten his character to be gay. Well, apparently he was gay in the game too, but it was subtle, but now in this TV series he's gay with this Frank guy that shows up. Anyways, none of that really matters. What matters is the ending for these two. And here's a spoiler: they both die. But his partner Frank, his gay lover, gets ill, physically ill, is some kind of condition or whatever. So he wants to die. So he asks for his partner Bill to help him commit suicide, basically. And then they own it. Bill ends up also killing himself with crushed pills. Let's watch the scene here. I'll watch it on mute though, because it's a new show. I don't really trust YouTube. Anyway, he crushes the pills and puts it in his wine. Very slow and methodical scene. And there he goes. We'll just jump through. And once he drinks, Bill also drinks, thus revealing, like shortly after revealing, that the whole wine bottle was full of enough of this medication to kill a horse, he says. Then they both go to bed and die. Anyways, there's oh, forgot to mention, this is set in the year 2023, and we have our assisted suicide propaganda right in there for you. Oh, these people. These people. Because this deviates from the game, right? They kill off the Bill character. Well, they wrap it up here with some propaganda of assisted suicide. How beautiful this moment was. They had their one last meal, and Bill says, when he reveals that he too is going to die, that he's had a good life. He's satisfied. They had their last steak dinner, and then they're out of there. Oh, you can't make this shit up, people. It's just ridiculous. It really, really is. It really is. There's really not much more to say. I just wanted to point out all this stuff and cover this issue because it's something I talked about for many years. And I was kind of just waiting, gathering stuff up, and working on other projects. But it's good to finally cover this one and get it out of the way because it really bothered me how everyone is catching on to these things 4 or 5 years after I was ranting about it. But anyways, it's all coming together, folks. The normalization of euthanasia, Soylent Green ending, your Demise Pill. That's coming in the future. First, it's the normalization made to adults and kids all alike. And then eventually it'll just be a government supplied in your rations. Because remember, we're heading to a major crisis here where food is going to be scarce, war is fragrant, the World War III, it's all up in there. Poly-crisis, crisis after crisis. And it'll be part of your rations. You'll have your depression pills and your Demise Pill. And your daily food ration and all that. You can make the choice. You want to live through this hard life or you just want to give up and do your part and get rid of help go to that carbon zero. Anyways, I thank you so much. This is Anonymous reporting from the brave new world, and I'll catch you all next time.